4, 5, 6, 7. Then pick up your telephone and listen for the dial tones.
Ah, the good old days. That phrase has different meanings for different generations, but baby boomers lived through things that almost sound too surreal to be true. Here are 10 golden age baby boomer memories that only they will remember.
Oh, I love to be
Oscar Mayer wieners are all meat, all good meat. Rich and complete meat protein, mildly seasoned to bring out all the good meat flavor.
Everyone would be in love with me.
Number 10. Black and white TVs. Can you imagine if all the fun, fuzzy colors on Mother Earth suddenly vanished and all that was left were shades of gray? It might sound like a boring, noir world to live in, but for a long time, it was simply reality. Not literally, though. Baby boomers grew up with black and white TV sets in their homes, and there was nothing wrong with it. As a matter of fact, there's nothing quite like the nostalgia of that monochromatic glow. Yes, younger generations, before there were color TVs, we had just one option, black and white. Before flat screen TVs, there were only big, boxy, cathode ray tube TVs. But while you think these black and white sets were bulky and basic, it was the boomers' very first window into the world. Millions of families around the world would gather around to watch their favorite shows, everything from sitcoms to the nightly news, all in the same grayscale that made everyday scenes look just a bit more mysterious, and let's be honest, somehow even a little more dramatic. Yes, creators leaned into shadows, contrast, and mood to captivate audiences, and this led to the era of film noirs, a genre that thrived on its dramatic lighting and gritty feel. Classics like Casablanca, Citizen Kane, Sunset Boulevard, and Double Indemnity became legendary thanks to the monochromatic limitations and spine-tingling atmospheres. And don't even get me started on the actors. The likes of Robert Mitchum, Barbara Stanwyck, Humphrey Bogart, and Claire Trevor, the queen of film noir herself, created a dynasty unlike ever seen. But of course, change was inevitable. When color TV sets finally started becoming available in the 1950s and 60s, studios faced a new challenge. They could either switch to color or bank on nostalgia by keeping up with monochromatic effects. Some of them even considered the cost, as color TVs were a luxury for many families. In the end, there was only one right option: color. Shows like The Munsters, which aired as black and white, were blown away by the sheer popularity of color shows such as Batman. Fans were dazzled with its colorful comic book style look. And who would blame them? Colors were fresh, different, and a lot more easy on the eyes. As more families adopted them, black and white became, well, a thing of the past. Speaking of the past, we all know that feeling when you can't find the remote and have to get up to change the channel, right? In fact, many newer TVs wouldn't even let you switch channels without a remote. Yet, once upon a time, baby boomers didn't even dream of one. To change channels, one would have to get up from the chair, walk over to the television, and fiddle with a lot of annoying buttons, a nightmare thought for Gen Zs. Still, I can't help feeling there's a certain charm that black and white TV holds that color just doesn't quite capture. It was a simpler, slower, and nostalgic time when whole families snuggled around a single screen. So before we go on to the next item on our list, here's a question for all the boomers. Do you ever miss that magical grayscale world? Leave your answer in the comments below. Number 9. Setting TV antenna. Now, if you thought black and white TVs were odd, just wait till I tell you about how annoying it was to set up TV antennas. Ever heard your grandma mention how things are so easy for your generation? Half of it is because you've got no antennas. While younger generations might not understand the struggle, boomers will remember this little contraption all too well. Before cable and satellite brought crystal clear image to living rooms everywhere, people had to rely on some good old-fashioned antennas to pick up television signals. And make no mistake, setting it up was a real pain in the rear. Yup, you heard it right. For those who grew up with them, antennas were a gateway to beloved shows. It had to be perfectly placed to catch a strong signal, allowing families to watch everything from Leave It to Beaver to The Twilight Zone to I Love Lucy and Bonanza. It's a bit sad that younger generations didn't watch the aforementioned shows because, boy, were they so good. It was filled with memorable characters like Lucy and Ricky, Beaver and Wally, and Sheriff Andy Taylor. And how about the Munsters TV show, The Real Deal? It had a wholesome cast, sensational comedy scenes, and even a bit of supernatural mystery right from the comfort of your living room. But only if the antenna was working in your favor. Getting that antenna to work was like trying to tune a radio station, and oh, what a pain that was. First, you had to find the sweet spot for your antenna, which meant adjusting the metal rods to get the best reception. And of course, this usually required a bit of trial and error, and maybe a little luck. You could spend even an hour trying to get the best reception and remove the static blob from your screen. At the time, it wasn't uncommon to see people contorting their bodies or holding the antenna in odd directions, all in hopes of making their favorite show come in clearly. Sometimes a friend or family member had to stand near the antenna, arms raised, just to keep the picture steady. Looking back, it's a wonder anyone could ever sit down long enough to enjoy the show. But guess what? Even if you managed to find the perfect spot to place your antenna in, you still had to hope the weather was crystal clear. Rain, snow, or any hint of a drizzle, and you could make the pictures hazy. And if there was a thunderstorm, forget about it. You're better off reading a book or taking a nap instead. Many boomers have fond and annoying nostalgic memories of waiting for the skies to clear up just so they could watch the last bit of their favorite program. But hey, it was all part of the experience, for better or worse, right? Contemporary streaming services and endless channels like Netflix and HBO make it hard to believe people once went through so much to watch their favorite shows. But make no mistake, those metallic elongated rods shaped the childhood of a million lives. Sadly, it's just one of those things younger generations might never truly understand. Number 8. Handwritten letters and waiting by the mailbox. Do you remember the thrill of rushing to the mailbox, hoping for a handwritten letter from a friend or a loved one? Of course you don't. You're Gen Z. You receive hundreds of messages from friends and followers every day in your little chirpy social apps. You don't even check your phone's mail. Messages are instant nowadays, and there are a lot of live video transmissions, so it's hard to imagine a time when communication took days or even weeks. But boomers remember those days well. Days when their main connection with distant friends and family came in the form of letters, painstakingly written and carefully mailed. On that note, allow me to take you back in time, long before the widespread use of the internet, mobile phones, and everything in between. This may sound strange, but back in the day, before email and texting, people communicated by sending paper letters and postcards through the mail. And no, I'm not talking about a dystopian society hundreds of years ago or during times of war. This was actually not so long ago, and the boomers will fondly remember it. They remember sending and receiving these physical tokens of affection. Yes, back then, writing a letter was more than just mindlessly fiddling pop-up buttons on your screen. You needed to sit down to truly express yourself. People poured their thoughts onto paper, sometimes filling pages with news, anecdotes, or even poetry. After writing, the letter was carefully sealed and addressed, and then off it went to the mailbox or post office, relying on the postal service to deliver it safely. And yes, the process is neither straightforward nor instantaneous. Postmen used to bring eagerly awaited items like mail, checks, and gifts. It's a far cry from modern times when you can get your email delivered right to your inbox and Amazon coldly drops your packages on your porch. Back in the day, you had to wait patiently for the postman to make his rounds, and if you were expecting an important letter or package, you can bet the anticipation was even greater. Depending on the distance, it might take several days or even weeks for a letter to reach its destination, and even longer to receive a reply. Worse, there was always the risk of a wrong address or a mix-up at the post office, which could mean your letter ended up with a stranger or never arrived at all. However, despite the wait and uncertainty, I can't help but feel that there was a unique charm to letter writing. From the choice of stationery to the familiar handwriting on the page, each envelope was intentional and carried the writer's deep feelings. Dare I say they even carried a piece of the cinder with them? Plus, it also encouraged people to be more thoughtful and articulate. Since there was no backspace or spell check, boomers often crafted their words carefully making letter writing an art form. Could that be it? Could that be the reason why older generations were better at spoken and written English? You can shade the baby boomers all you want, but the average Joe had a certain command of language that's been buried by today's world of never-ending abbreviations and emojis. Legend has it that Albert Einstein feared the day technology would eventually outpace human interaction. If he did, he would definitely be onto something. Still, we can all agree, instant messaging is pretty hard to give up. Speaking of things that technology has made better, check out what we have got next. Number 7. When TV said goodnight. Following our look back at the art of letter writing, let's go into yet another ritual from yesteryear. One that might sound downright strange to younger viewers, including millennials. Imagine you're snuggled up with your significant other, binging your favorite late-night show or romantic comedy, and just as things are getting to the good part, boom! The screen fades to black. And no, your television didn't develop a fault. There were no more channels or shows, just a brief clip of the national anthem, followed by nothing but loud, irritating static or simple music. It may sound like a dystopian nightmare, but back in the 1950s and 1960s, television stations didn't just run around the clock like they do today. This was commonly called the TV sign-off, and it was a nightly routine in countless homes. But why exactly did TV stations sign off every night? Well, unlike contemporary times, television programming in the early days was far more limited than today. Most stations had a set lineup of shows, news, and commercials that ran only during designated hours. Running a station round the clock would have required more power, staffing, and maintenance costs, which just didn't make sense when there was little demand for late-night programming. So instead of wasting resources, stations just wrapped up their broadcast around midnight with a final good night to viewers. But hey, it's the way it happened that made it so nostalgic. Just before sign-off, the station would play the national anthem along with a short video montage of waving flags, patriotic clips, or even pictures of landmarks. What can I say? Americans sure know how to make a statement. For many families, this nightly tradition was a reverse alarm clock. It was a symbolic last call to turn off the set and catch some sleep. And if you didn't, good luck getting entertainment. After the anthem, the TV would switch to a test pattern, usually a simple black and white image featuring a target-like design. The test pattern signified that the transmitter was still functioning, even though no programming was scheduled. Sometimes it was accompanied by a low hum or static, a nostalgic sound now, but a total bore back in the day. But while this signal was just a final call to turn off the TV and head to bed, what if I told you that the test patterns weren't all for naught? Yes, engineers actually used the signal to calibrate television sets and ensure that the screen resolution and alignment were in tune for the next day's shows. Now, I may get a lot of stick for this, but there's actually a lesson here. In a world where televisions, phones, and laptop screens are almost always on and accessible, don't you think we've lost something by eliminating those pauses? With 24-hour news cycles, streaming services, and social media, it's not easy to lose track of time. Plus, scientists are worried that they're not only outpacing human interaction, but also dulling our eyes. So maybe, just maybe, we could still use that reminder today. After all, everyone needs a break, even from our screens. Curious about what other forgotten baby boomer traditions make our list? Stick around, because you won't want to miss what's coming up next.
If you wouldn't feel quite right about spending $27.95 for an electric percolator, don't. Get it with S&H Green Stamps.
Number 6. Licking S&H Green Stamps. Ah, the nostalgia of the good old days, a time when shopping came with a little extra incentive. Before digital rewards programs became the order of the day, gas stations and especially grocery stores used promotional stamps to entice shoppers. It all began in 1896 when Sperry and Hutchinson sold stamps to retailers, who then distributed them as bonuses based on purchase amounts. At first, the stickers were created not only to incentivize shoppers, but also to promote loyalty. As a matter of fact, green stamps were one of the first retail loyalty programs meant to keep customers from shifting their everyday trade to competitors. Issued in denominations of 1, 10, and 50 points, the green stamps were perforated with a gummed back, and shoppers would collect them by licking their backs and placing them in free collector's books provided by S&H. Each book had 24 pages, each requiring 50 points to make a total of 1,200 points. Once filled, you could take them to the green stamp store and turn them in for all kinds of household items like pots, pans, or electric toasters. Scratch that, you could even get sports equipment or jewelry. Like all 4 of the items we've talked about so far, there was something inherently charming about green stamps. Families would huddle together, pasting stamps into their books while watching their favorite shows on an 18-inch black and white TV that usually only had 3 channels to choose from. As parents were fiddling with the buttons or adjusting their antennas, kids would laugh and help lick the stamps while discussing which household item they'd redeem next: a blender, picture frames, or perhaps a croquet set? Call it what you will, but it was a much simpler time and a delightful bonding experience that newer generations just can't relate to. And let's not forget about the thrill of double or triple stamp days. Most stores did this once a week, and everyone would plan shopping trips, excited to maximize their green stamp hauls. All the families would collect them and proudly show their neighbors what they had picked out. What a way to make memories from a seemingly mundane activity. However, as the world progressed, so did consumer habits. The rise of the internet and online shopping led the company to modify its practices, offering green points as rewards for online purchases. Worse, they could only be earned and redeemed at a selected few stores, such as Food Town in New York State and New Jersey. As you'd expect, the modern approach never quite captured the same charm. Plus, the company also faced a series of legal issues. In 1972, the company was brought before the United States Supreme Court by the Federal Trade Commission for violating the Fairness Doctrine. Looking back, it's clear that green stamps were more than just a promotional gimmick. They were a slice of a kinder, more innocent time when Americans weren't so bothered. It's a heartwarming memory for the baby boomers who love reminiscing about the past and the simple pleasures of life. But again, the journey doesn't end here. Keep watching, because we have more nostalgic treasures to explore together. Number 5. Milk on the doorstep. Having talked about black and white TVs, metallic antennas, test patterns, and even green stamps, it's only natural that we talk about everyone's favorite protein drink. According to recent statistics, did you know that up to 70% of Americans consume some form of dairy daily? We're certainly not complaining though. Whether it's cheese, yogurt, or a tall glass of milk, dairy is a beloved nutritious staple that's loaded with protein, calcium, and essential vitamins. Milk, in particular, offers protein, vitamin D, and other beneficial minerals. And guess what? There's something for everyone, even those looking for lighter options. Grocery aisles are stocked with low-fat and non-fat milk, like skim and even lactose-free alternatives. This allows anyone to enjoy its benefits without weight gain concerns. Every day, millions of people across the world buy milk and dairy products from stores. What if I told you that this option, which we now take for granted, was actually a recent development? Yes, back in the day, milk wasn't always something you'd find on store shelves. Milkmen, or occasionally milkwomen, would stop by to deliver fresh milk and cream right to your doorstep. And no, it wasn't seen as a convenience. It was part of daily life, as families relied on those regular routes to stock up on dairy essentials. In fact, according to USDA agricultural surveys, about 30% of milk in the 1960s was still delivered directly to homes. So what changed? While several factors contributed to the decline of milk delivery, you'd be hard-pressed to say technological advancements weren't major drivers. By the 1940s, refrigerators were becoming more common, with about 64% of U.S. households owning one by 1940. As grocery stores began installing larger refrigeration units and expanding their dairy sections, families could buy milk during routine shopping trips, reducing the need for daily deliveries. Additionally, the rise of car ownership made grocery shopping easier. It allowed people to buy perishable items like milk whenever they needed them, instead of relying on doorstep deliveries. And don't even get us started on how cost-effective it is. Subscribing to daily or weekly delivery services was more expensive than just buying milk from a store close to you. Plus, grocery stores were rapidly growing and offered a wider selection of dairy products, especially when compared to those being delivered. Families had the option of trying different brands and types, which wasn't as feasible with traditional milk delivery routes. In all, this shift eventually led to the decline of the milkman, and by the end of the 1970s, milk delivery was a fading memory for most Americans. But guess what? Although the era of the milkman may be utterly lost for most, some smaller farms and specialty dairies have revived the tradition. With today's growing interest in farm-fresh organic products, home milk delivery has seen a modest comeback. But for most Americans, the milkman remains a nostalgic symbol of a simpler, slower time in American life. But what do you think? Would you prefer subscribing to a daily or weekly dairy delivery service, or just walking to a store to get yours? Regardless of what your answer might be, milk delivery has its benefits. It was often fresh from farms and healthier than processed shelf milk.
By Grammy, I knew that'd make all them eavesdroppers hang up and run outside.
Number 4. Rotary Phones. Bring! How long has it been since you made a call with a rotary dial phone? Scratch that. Do you know what a rotary phone is? Only older generations, like the baby boomers, got practical experience using this device. So for those of you who don't know, rotary phones are types of wired telephones that use a rotating dial to select the telephone numbers. And yes, they were once the only communication option available in nearly every home in America. Similarly to how an adding machine functions, rotary or dial phones worked by sending a series of electrical pulses through the phone line, each representing a dialed number to connect the recipient. It was also possible to dial a number by tapping the hook to match each digit. Sturdy as rocks and dependable as sunrise, these bulky machines once united families, enabled businesses, and sustained long-distance romance. But it's not to say that they were invincible. Its mechanism was entirely electromechanical and relied on a dial with finger holes that connected the calling party to the recipient via electrical pulses. However, these systems were prone to error. Electrical faults, mechanical wear, or even minor missteps in dialing could cause the wrong number to be connected. And yeah, it was pretty common. Can you imagine unintentionally reaching a stranger during an emergency? Business calls, for instance, could accidentally reach competitors, or a sensitive family discussion could reach an outsider, revealing unintended details. This unpredictability, especially during busy times, made rotary phones very unreliable. Plus, they weren't exactly mobile either. Modern phones can enter a bag, pocket, or even be held comfortably in your palm. Boomer dial phones, in comparison, just couldn't afford the luxury. Despite these drawbacks, though, it's worth adding that phones provided a significant leap in accessibility. They single-handedly introduced a system where anyone could quickly connect to others without operator assistance, marking a massive step toward the modern telecommunications network. In the 1950s and 60s, rotary dials were phased out in favor of touch-tone dials, which generated paired audio tones for each digit rather than the older pulse signals. Using paired tones reduced errors and helped prevent fraud, where someone could potentially imitate tones to influence call charges. This shift allowed central office systems to shrink dramatically from massive relay setups to compact electronics, bringing substantial cost savings, lowering energy and cooling demands, and enabling a wide range of new services on the phone network. These days, dial phones are typically only found in movies and TV shows to depict a time before touch-tone phones became mainstream. But if you're lucky enough to see one, there's a big chance that it still works today. They were built to last for decades and can still receive incoming calls. Good luck trying to make an outgoing call, though. Before we talk about the next item on our list, if you're still with us, chances are you're loving our rundown of nostalgic memories. So why don't you hit the subscribe button and turn on the post notifications so you'll be in the loop whenever we release a new video. It'll only take you a second. Already subscribed? Great, let's move on to memory number 3. Number 3, drive-in movies. In today's world, enjoying a movie often means gathering with friends at a bustling cinema to watch the latest blockbuster. Remember the buzz that came with Marvel Cinematic Universe's Black Panther? Millions of people across the world were immersed in the masterpiece, and the movie was a box office hit, scoring $1.35 billion from a budget of only $200 million. But it's not to say every millennial and Gen Z enjoy cinematic experiences. Some prefer the cozy alternative of streaming from the comfort of their homes, where they can relax in their pajamas, have popcorn in hand, and watch films on their mobile devices. Yet, it wasn't always this way. As a matter of fact, did you know that there was a time when the only way to watch a movie was to go to a theater? Before the advent of home entertainment systems and streaming services, people flocked to cinemas, excited to catch the latest release on a big screen. And then came drive-in movie theaters, a cultural phenomenon that surged in popularity during the 1950s and 1960s. Like the name implies, a drive-in cinema features a large outdoor movie screen, a projection booth, a concession stand, and ample parking for cars. Here, customers can enjoy movies from the comfort of their vehicles. The screen can range from a simple painted wall to a complex steel truss structure. But while drive-ins also include small playgrounds for children and some picnic tables or benches, most of the moviegoers were young couples. The atmosphere was very relaxed and provided a level of intimacy and comfort that traditional theaters simply couldn't match. It was the perfect backdrop for couples who wanted to spend quality time together, snuggling under blankets and sharing snacks. However, as time marched on, the allure of the drive-in faded. Changes in societal norms, urban development, and the rise of multiplex theaters shifted the way people experienced films. Today, it's a sad note that these nostalgic cinemas are rarely found. Many have closed down or been repurposed, replaced by modern cinemas or shopping centers. But if you're lucky to find one, they actually look like this. While a few still operate, it's way better in the nighttime and often rely on a dedicated following to keep their screens lit and the projector running. When they do, though, it looks like this. Plus, habits are significantly different. The younger generation either prefers the buzz that comes with ostentatious social events or just stays at home to binge their favorite movie, series, or TV show. Only a few possess the flair for intimacy and quiet, slower social interactions characteristic of older generations like the baby boomers. But as we close the curtains to one more chapter of movie watching history, we open the pages of another. Coming next is the incredible impact of one of America's forgotten memories and how they forever changed the movie nights in households across the nation. Can you guess what it is? Pause the video, lock your answers in the comment section below, and make sure you don't cheat. Ready? Alright. Number 2. Video cassette recorders. Today, DVRs and streaming services let you watch whatever you want, whenever you want. But back in the day, if you wanted to watch a movie or TV show, you had to do it when it aired on TV. Then came the VCR, giving rise to home entertainment giants like Blockbuster. For the first time, you could set a timer to record your favorite show and watch it later. In 1956, Charles Ginsberg and Ray Dolby, working with Ampex Corporation, invented the first commercial reel-to-reel videotape recorder. This breakthrough allowed television broadcasters to record shows for the first time and air them later. Before this invention, all television programming was live. About a decade later, in 1969, Sony introduced the first affordable VCR, and by 1976, the VHS tape format completely dominated the market. Video rental stores quickly followed, with Blockbuster launching its first store in Dallas, Texas in October 1985, and eventually expanding to 9,000 locations across the U.S. For those who grew up in the 80s and 90s, video cassette recorders were essential items in American homes. The fact that you could finally watch what you wanted whenever you wanted was a complete game changer in home entertainment. Gone were the days where you'd have to wait for your favorite TV show to come on and tune into it. You could pop in a tape, sit back, and hit play. VCRs were the first thing to give baby boomers control over their own schedules, and of course, it was a big deal. Sure, it took a while before many got the hang of adjusting the tracking, but boy, hearing that whirr was totally worth it. Places like Blockbuster were packed on Friday nights with rows and rows of movies to choose from. You'd wander down the aisles trying to find the perfect movie for the night. It's hard to describe now, but there was something magical about that little routine. The only downside was that tapes didn't always cooperate. Sometimes you'd set up the timer wrong, or accidentally tape over something important. A lot of people still have stories of recording over a wedding video or a favorite episode by mistake. And oh, the tapes themselves weren't perfect. After prolonged use, they'd wear out and get fuzzy. The audio would sometimes start to go too. In time, VCRs began to fade. DVDs took over in the late 90s, and soon after, streaming changed everything. Curious whether people still use them today? Well, the short answer is yes, but barely. Many people used to watch old recordings, home videos, and movies not available in other formats. Sure, it can't guarantee a high quality like a DVD or Blu-ray, and let's face it, contemporary systems are much easier to use. But hey, it's like having an antique book. Why wouldn't you want to have one? To this day, a small but dedicated group of enthusiasts appreciate the nostalgia and unique qualities of VHS tapes, while others use VCRs for practical purposes like digitizing content or recording TV shows. You might want to fasten your seatbelts for number 1, though. It's going to leave you breathless. Number 1. Cars had no seatbelts. This might be a controversial topic, but by today's safety standards, every baby boomer could have been unalived long before they were teenagers. They defied danger on a daily basis and were drawn to the risk of life. They found it fun, pulsating, and super immersive. They participated in activities that they'd never for a second allow their children to do or even think about doing. For instance, did you know that back in the day, boomers drove without using seatbelts? Their cars never even had one. People would just pile into cars and drive fast while hoping for the best. Of course, this led to some accidents, but people were much more carefree back then. And it's not just about high-octane driving. Most parents had a hands-off approach, and the idea of baby-proofing a home meant closing the cellar door so the baby wouldn't fall down the stairs. Covering unused electrical outlets just added unnecessary hassle when trying to plug in the vacuum cleaner. And who, except someone looking for trouble, would use medicine bottles that required a jackhammer to open? Sure, there were times kids nibbled on an extension cord, but as long as they didn't chew through it and disconnect the TV, lamps, fan, hi-fi, and clock plugged into it, parents just didn't care so much. And what about the bikes? Not only did baby boomers not wear helmets, but they also never even heard of them. Bicycles typically came with just a single reflector on the back, which often broke off and was seldom replaced. While lights were available, they were seen as a luxury for show-offs. Additionally, there were no bike paths or lanes to separate cyclists from traffic. Cars? Even worse. There were car seats for toddlers, but their purpose was merely to keep the child sitting upright rather than providing any real safety. At the time, the prevailing belief was that seatbelts and other safety restraints were for the faint-hearted. Riding in the back of a pickup truck with friends was considered the quintessential American experience, and the idea of using seatbelts was deemed unnecessary. To make things worse, there was no internet or 24-hour news back then, so people had no idea how often and tragic the consequences of such actions were. Back then, you might hear a story now and then, but the lack of actual footage made it sound fickle and exaggerated. It is a stark contrast to nowadays when statistics are readily available online and public awareness of the dangers associated with certain habits is at an all-time high. For that, we should be thankful. And with that, we drop the curtains on our nostalgic rundown through forgotten American memories. Or have we? As a bonus, we've got one more thing for you. Remember when America fought and won the fight against polio? In the early 1900s, polio was a serious and often fatal disease that affected children for centuries. and there was no cure or way to prevent it. Thousands of people were crippled or died each year from the disease alone. But while many baby boomers will remember friends and family members affected by the dangerous disease, I'm pretty sure they can also remember April 12, 1955 as a significant date. What's so special about it, you ask? That was the day that the American press finally announced the successful trials of the polio vaccine. In 1956, Elvis Presley famously received the vaccine on live television, and by 1979, polio was declared eradicated in the United States. No other generation would ever suffer from it again. So, there you have it. 10 and 1 of the most nostalgic baby boomer memories. Whether or not you could relate to most of them, we're sure that these exposés have given you a lot to think about. If you found these stories as intriguing as we did, smash the like button and tell us in the comments which revelation caught you off guard the most. But don't leave just yet. There's still more to discover. Be sure to check out the video currently displaying on your screen.